live in Milwaukee or not, has a vested interest that the city of Milwaukee not burned down like Ferguson and Baltimore, Maryland.
Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark vowing to not let Milwaukee erupt into the kind of unrest that occurred in Ferguson and Baltimore. Yet, over the weekend, violent protests. Look at this. A car completely consumed. This all happened after a black cop killed an armed black suspect. The shooting, though ruled justified by the police, sparked protests. Several businesses in that car we saw torched by protesters. At least one person hit by gunfire, and an officer hospitalized after a rock smashed the windshield of a squad car. A disturbing story, but one we will discuss with the newest member of the Newsmax TV family. Joining us from his studio, you saw him this afternoon at 4 o'clock Eastern, veteran radio host Howie Carr, hosting the Howie Carr Show not only on radio, but here on Newsmax TV. Howie, welcome to the Newsmax family.
Thank you, JD. It's a pleasure. I'm glad I can be on Newsmax TV in addition to having my own radio show here in Boston.
Well, obviously, this topic from Boston all the way across the country, what transpired in Milwaukee has really put people on edge. And it seems like this doesn't follow a script where it's a white cop shooting an unarmed black person. This is a guy who was a suspect who refused to drop the weapon. The officer happened to be African American, and yet it appears, despite what Sheriff Clark said, this whole situation in Milwaukee has completely deteriorated.
Yeah, JD, it's a terrible situation, and there seems to be, if there ever can be any justification for this kind of rioting, there's none whatsoever here. You have apparently the entire incident was recorded on the police officer's body camera. The chief, the mayor, who's a Democrat, by the way, have said there is absolutely no question but that the cop was justified. And the dead man, he's a convicted criminal. He had a gun, JD, with 23 bullets, a stolen gun with 23 bullets. He had more firepower than the cop. There is absolutely nothing to justify what's going on in Milwaukee, and yet it happened yet again. And you also have these mobs chanting racist chants against the local population. It's totally outrageous. I'm glad that Sheriff Clark is speaking out against it.
Not only is Sheriff David Clark speaking out against it, but Governor Scott Walker now has called out the National Guard. Do you believe we will see a third consecutive night of violence in Milwaukee?
I certainly hope not, JD. But you know, who knows? This has been a problem for a very long time, as you know, JD. Back in the late 1960s, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, before he was elected to the U.S. Senate as a Democrat from New York, wrote a memo for President Nixon. And he said that the welfare programs that had been put in place by the Great Society had just not panned out, and what the black community needed was a period of what he called benign neglect. And as you know, he was attacked as a racist, and yet that's what Sheriff Clark has been talking about all day. That you have these problems where these welfare programs have had a terrible impact on the inner city communities. And nobody can say that unless they want to be attacked. And it's happening again, I'm sure, with Sheriff Clark tonight.
Interesting timing, because Donald Trump is due in Milwaukee tomorrow. Speaking of Mr. Trump, it appears that he is amending his comments somewhat about President Obama, Hillary Clinton, and ISIS. Let's take a look on Twitter. He tweeted out this: ratings challenge CNN reports so seriously that I call President Obama and Secretary Clinton the founder of ISIS and MVP. They don't get sarcasm. What is your take on, well, I tell you what, before we get to that, let's listen to what Mr. Trump said in his own words about the media over the weekend in Connecticut.
I said Barack Obama is the founder of ISIS. Then I talked about, you're all screaming it over here, right? Then I talked about receiving the most valuable player award. And I said about her receiving the most what? Right? Yeah, the most. Her you can keep. Who the hell cares? But look, receiving the most valuable plane, so they cut it. So they have it. Donald Trump said that he is the founder of ISIS. Then they debate it for 2 days.
So here's what I'm curious about, Howie. Look, for all Republican nominees, taking on the press is red meat for the base. But for independent voters and a general election, should Trump keep this up or just focus exclusively on Hillary?
The latter, obviously, J.D. You know, we had a mayor in Boston who used to say about the attacks on him in the newspapers, never complain, never explain. And I wish Donald Trump would take that advice, which is about a century old. You're right. There's no upside to this. He's got to concentrate on Hillary. This is just inside baseball. You and I chuckle every time we see a tweet, calling it the failing New York Times or the ratings challenge CNN. But he doesn't need our votes. He needs the votes of people who are worried about the economy, who are worried about losing their jobs because of the latest Pacific trade deal. That's who he's got to go after. This is a pure distraction. He just keeps taking the bait. I've said in my column, JD, on my show, I just wish he would turn off the TV screens on his plane and just start reading position papers. He just can't react to everything. You don't go onto sites and look down and see what people are writing about you on the message boards. They're trolls. That's why they're called trolls. Get over it, Donald Trump, and just stay on message.
Well, you talk about message and position papers, yet apparently there is a, quote, refinement to Mr. Trump's notion of immigration policy. He's talking now about political tests for those coming to this country. Under his plan, people who want to come here will have to take a simple test to determine whether or not they share American values. Mr. Trump also says he wants to stop issuing visas in places where the State Department and the Department of Homeland Security cannot effectively screen visa applicants. That last part I'm cool with, Howie, but that first part, can't people just lie on a test about their feelings concerning the United States?
I agree, JD. It doesn't mean anything. The thing is, I don't think he has to refine his positions on, immigration. He has the right. There was a law passed in 1952 by Congress. It was vetoed by Truman, but it was overridden and it became law. The President of the United States can stop anybody he wants to from coming into the U.S. if he thinks it is a security matter. So I don't think why does Donald Trump have to explain anything? He just tells his critics to go read the law. If the Democrats had a problem with this, they've had plenty of opportunities over the last 65 years to repeal this legislation, and they haven't done it. So he's totally within his rights. And again, I think he just has to stop responding to every nattering nabob of negativism, as
I remember that
Agnew
line.
once said.
Hey, Howie is making like a Spiro Agnew. Now, we know that you're inimitable with your own style on radio with your column. That's why we're so excited to have you here at Newsmax TV. First show under your belt. It began at 4 o'clock Eastern today. Tell us, if people didn't see today, what can they expect in the days to come on your show? What's your philosophy of bringing your talk show to Newsmax TV?
JD, the first goal of the Howie Carr show, whether it's on radio or TV, is to entertain the largest possible audience. We like to have a lot of sound cuts. We like to have a lot of guests. We had Ann Coulter on today. We're trying to set up Pat Buchanan for tomorrow. We're trying to work out a system so that we can actually Skype them onto the show so you can see them on your TV screen on Newsmax. We haven't figured that quite out yet, but we're working on that. We're going to try to have good guests. We move a lot of calls. We have, I would say, the best or the largest collection of sound bites that we can possibly get day after day. As you can see behind me, we're in a state-of-the-art studio.
It is
so if there's
beautiful.
ever breaking news during our time slot from 4 to 5 Eastern, we'll have it right up on the screen behind you. I think it's going to be a good addition to the Newsmax
We're happy to have you,
lineup.
Howie.
And
Happy to have you.
People will
Thank
give
you
me
so
a chance
much.
to and give my show a chance. 4 to 5 every day on Newsmax.
Howie, we look forward to tomorrow's show. And that'll do it for this program tonight. J.D. Hayworth saying, stay brave, stay free, stay tuned.